In the college football national championship, Clemson beat Alabama 44-16. It was shocking. It surprised me. Clemson dominated Alabama thoroughly. I recorded the game. I watched it 3 times since it came out, since it happened on Monday. And I told someone I was watching it again because I was curious to see what happened. Why did Alabama lose? And someone told me, they were like, well, Clemson came to win and Alabama sucked. And it's so annoying. I don't like when casual football fans say things like that. Because what are you telling me, that Alabama came to lose? What does that even mean? I was really curious. What happened? There's so much more behind this. And I came down to 3 big reasons why Clemson was able to dominate Alabama. The first one, truthfully, is kind of, we learned something. During the national championship, we learned that Tua Tagovailoa, the Alabama quarterback, is simply not ready to enter the NFL. I know that's silly, but a lot of people say, Tua, NFL ready. Not true. In the NFL, you have 2 big things you got to deal with. The first one's a messy pocket. People all around you, guys hitting you almost every play. People, bodies all around, a messy pocket. The second thing you have to deal with consistently in the NFL is defenses disguising their coverage. It'll look one way before the snap. The ball snap, they do something totally different. Quarterbacks get tricked. A messy pocket and disguised coverages. That is a lot of what Clemson did against Alabama in the national championship. In fact, I would say that Clemson's defensive game plan was nearly flawless. It was fantastic. This is the first time Alabama's quarterback Tua has had to play a game under NFL conditions. Or maybe the Georgia game is another example. But Clemson has the best defensive line in football. In college football, they're fantastic. Clemson was giving Tua trouble all night long, kind of hitting him a lot, giving him constant pressure. They made him move around in the pocket. It was ugly. And the pressure got to Tua Tagovailoa. In the second half, instead of stepping into his throws, he was kind of fading away and leaning away from his passes, hurting his accuracy. And look, I understand it's hard to play in a messy pocket. I've played quarterback. I played in college. It's really difficult to play while guys are trying to rip your head off and inches away from you. But it's something you got to do in the NFL. So one thing, Clemson's pressure got to Tua. He did not play well in a messy pocket. The other thing is that Clemson's defensive scheme was outstanding. It was fantastic. Tua threw 2 interceptions on plays where Clemson's defense disguised their coverage and baited Tua into throwing the ball. So before the snap, Clemson would line up in one coverage, and then when the ball was snapped, their guys would run to their different places and play a different coverage than it looked like. For example, on Tua's second interception, the corner sat in the flat. That's something, it's near the line of scrimmage, near the wide receiver. And there were 2 high safeties pre-snap, making it look like cover 2. Now, when the ball was snapped, the corner turned and ran to do a deep spot downfield, and the 2 safeties at the top of the screen, at 2 high safeties, adjusted their coverage, moving over. And so pre-snap, this looked like base cover 2. Post-snap, the actual coverage they ran was cloud coverage, which is a type of cover 3. The corner that bailed has a third of the field. The 2 safeties have the middle third and the right third of the field. So Tua ran the play assuming it was cover 2, and that's why he threw an interception. He threw the ball where he should have against cover 2, but another corner came out of where he didn't expect. Another corner came and picked off the pass deep downfield. So quarterbacks are taught that pre-snap you have to build a hypothesis. Based on the way defenders are lined up, it looks like X coverage. Looks like cover 1 or cover 2, whatever coverage you think it is pre-snap. But after the ball is snapped, post-snap, you have to confirm your belief. Oh yeah, the corner did sit in the flat, therefore it is cover 2. Tua didn't confirm his belief. He went on the assumption that what he saw pre-snap is what indeed they ran. That is why Clemson baited and how Clemson baited Tua into throwing 2 interceptions. Tua twice did not confirm his belief. Pre-snap, he read one coverage. Clemson didn't run the coverage they lined up in, and Tua threw interceptions because of it. It's ugly. It's a painful loss. I feel bad for Tua. He didn't read the field very well. In fact, he had a big sack, or he missed a big blitz later in the game where a blitzer came from the left. The running back released, was wide open. He didn't throw him the ball. These are painful lessons for Tua to learn. But I think he's going to also grow a lot as a quarterback from watching the Clemson game. When he goes back and watches the film from this game, it's going to make Tua a better quarterback. He's going to learn tremendously. I think it's really interesting. So, as a college football player, Tua is in a great spot. Look, he's going to win a lot of games. Alabama's a great spot for a quarterback. Win a bunch of games, have a ton of fun, play with really talented teammates. If you want to play in college football, have a great time, Alabama's the spot to be as a quarterback. But as a future NFL quarterback, Tua is going to have to overcome the decision he made in going to Alabama. He's not being challenged in like 90% of his games. Most of the time, Alabama's offensive line is so good and his receivers are so talented, he doesn't have to operate the way you would in an NFL game. He can sit back in the pocket with no pressure. He can throw the ball up to receivers who make incredible plays. Tua has not had to deal with some of the challenges that other quarterbacks do at other programs, which make him a little bit behind when it comes to NFL preparedness. Look, I believe Tua is going to continue to improve. But right now, based on the things we saw against Clemson, Tua didn't handle pressure very well. He faded away from throws. He didn't step into things. He didn't recognize blitzes very well. And Tua really got fooled multiple times by Clemson's coverage. Again, he didn't confirm the belief. Pre-snap, it looked like cover 2. Post-snap, you got to make sure it's actually cover 2. And twice, on both interceptions, Tua didn't do that. And so we've seen some holes now in Tua's game, which it's not a time to panic. But right now, Tua's not ready to enter the NFL. That's all that means. Doesn't mean he can't get better. Doesn't mean he won't. I think he will. And I think I'm honestly, as a fan of Tua, a guy who believes he's a great NFL quarterback down the road. I think his future lies in the NFL. I'm so glad Tua had this experience of losing to Clemson. This embarrassing loss, this painful loss with some really ugly plays from Tua is actually going to be good for him because he's going to watch the film and learn from those mistakes and grow as a player. And so that's what I'm most excited to watch from Tua down the road is how does he learn from this game film? Does he start to recognize blitzes a little better? Does he understand when teams are trying to fool him with disguising coverages? That's what I want to see from Tua down the road. And I personally believe he's going to improve and grow as a quarterback. So that's one reason why Clemson dominated Alabama. The second reason why Clemson beat Alabama was Clemson simply outcoached Alabama. Multiple times in key moments, Alabama made really poor play calls. For example, there was that terrible fake field goal on 4th and long. I don't know what you were thinking. I thought the field goal was going to put it into a 2-possession game. I was really excited. Alabama ran a terrible, terrible fake field goal. Then later on 4th and goal, near the end of the game, Alabama ran a quarterback sweep. They said, Tua, just run the ball to the outside. That's a terrible, terrible decision. I would have come up with something more creative. So multiple times, not only in play calling, but also scheme, Clemson beat Alabama. Clemson's defensive coordinator, Brent Venables, had an incredible game plan. But it's not just that Brent Venables had a great game plan. It's the fact that Clemson's players were able to execute the wonderfully designed game plan. That's so impressive. It's one thing to have a plan. It's another thing to actually follow through and have your guys execute it. So Brent Venables, listen to that name, Brent Venables. He's Clemson's defensive coordinator. Earlier in July 2018, he signed a 5-year deal worth $11.6 million. He delivers every single ounce of that money. I think eventually you're going to hear Brent Venables' name brought up as a head coaching candidate. I really hope Brent Venables stays at Clemson. I do. I think that he's got an incredible thing going. I mean, we see a lot of guys have a great thing going, and they bail early. They leave the dynasty. A great example of that recently was North Dakota State. They're a Division I AA team, an FCS team. They just won their 4th national championship in 5 seasons. Actually, it's their 7th national championship since 2011. That means NDSU, North Dakota State University, has won a national championship every single season, except for 2016 and since 2011. And Chris Kleiman is NDSU's head coach. He just left. He's leaving after 5 seasons and 4 national championships. Again, 4 of those 7 national championships, he was the head coach. He's leaving from NDSU to go to Kansas State. He's leaving a dynasty behind. And I love Chris Kleiman. I hope he has a great career. He's not going to be nearly as successful at Kansas State as he was at North Dakota State. It's just not going to happen. You can't duplicate that success. So I think Chris Kleiman's honestly making a mistake leaving a dynasty behind. And I really hope Brent Venables doesn't do something similar. Brent Venables is an unbelievable defensive coordinator. He's great for his role. He's an integral part of what Clemson does. And if we're going to keep this Alabama-Clemson rivalry going, Brent Venables being at Clemson is a huge part of that. I hope he stays at Clemson and lets the dynasty play out. I think the next 4 to 5 seasons between Alabama and Clemson is going to be a slugfest, a battle in recruiting, a battle in the college football playoff. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to see it. I think it's interesting to look at the differences as well as the similarities between Alabama's head coach, Nick Saban, and Clemson's head coach, Dabo Swinney. Here's a weird stat for you. I found this. It's very bizarre. In the last 4 seasons, both Clemson and Alabama are 55-4 with 2 national championships. It's crazy. They're like identical. They're twins. It's so funny to me. But if you watch the way the two teams simply leave the locker room, there's so much symbolism there. I think it's fascinating, and it really translates to the way that the two head coaches run their programs. So if you watch Nick Saban and Alabama leave the locker room, the way they run out of the tunnel, Nick Saban is leading his team. Literally, his team is behind him, and Nick Saban leads the way. If you watch Dabo Swinney, Clemson's head coach, run out of the tunnel, he's arm in arm with his players. He's physically with his players. Leading together versus leading the players. It's interesting to me. Nick Saban's kind of like the stern principal, and Dabo Swinney's the cool uncle, the older brother, the guy you admire, but he's one of the guys. You respect him, you listen to him, but he's one of you rather than up above you. And so while you respect both Nick Saban and Dabo Swinney, I have a feeling Dabo Swinney is far more fun. Alabama's dominated. That's great. But the more you dominate and win, the harder it is to listen to some guy yelling at you to work harder. And that's the way that Nick Saban leads. So I think that based on the styles of the two teams, Clemson's more fun, Alabama's a little bit more stern, more grinded out. Based on the wear styles, I think Alabama and Clemson are both exactly where they need to be going into this offseason. Clemson's on top. And Dabo Swinney's message of, let's have fun and win, that works really, really well when you're the top dog. I think it's interesting, the number 1 recruit from Alabama, Justin Ross, the best high school recruit in Alabama last year, didn't go to Auburn, didn't go to Alabama University, he went to Clemson. That's a big message. Recruiting in the South, people go, oh man, Nick Saban's not even getting the best recruit out of his own state. That's a big deal. And then in the title game, that same player, Justin Ross, who left Alabama, the state of Alabama, left his home state to go to Clemson. That same player went off, had a bunch of great catches and had a long touchdown for Clemson against Alabama, against his hometown team. That's a big deal. Clemson dominated Alabama 44-16. So players in the South, high school football players, look and go, Clemson's having fun. They're landing great recruits, and they beat Alabama pretty heavily. The biggest loss we've ever seen Alabama take. Who would you rather play with? If you're a high school kid in the South, would you rather play with fun Clemson, that fun Dabo Swinney guy who's in arm with his players and they're winning championships? Or would you rather play for the guy who yells, Nick Saban? This is why Alabama is exactly where they need to be. Right now, as of this offseason, Alabama's an underdog. First time in a long time. And that's exactly where they need to be. Nick Saban's grinded out style, that stern approach, it works better when you're pissed off and trying to get back to the top. As an underdog, getting yelled at motivates you. When you're on top, you go, shut up, old man. It's just a different approach. It's just very different. And so I really, truly believe Clemson, Alabama, the next 4 or 5 years is going to be a heavyweight fight. I can't wait to watch how the recruiting plays out. Who gets better recruits? Who recruits better in the South? Where do players from the South want to go? Clemson or Alabama? Stern, fun. Dominated in the national championship, just lost the national championship. Where do players go? And how are they going to play each other in the college football playoff? I know a lot of people are talking about, this team's up and coming, and that team's up and coming. Ohio State, Michigan, I don't know. The teams I'm most interested in right now are Clemson and Alabama. That back and forth, that drama in the South, who's going to dominate in the next couple of years, that is what I want to watch. Clemson, Alabama. I know people are upset. People are like, another boring championship. I loved it. I ate it up. I love that drama between these two head coaches and these two programs. And I guarantee Alabama is going to come looking for revenge in the future against Clemson. So in the national championship, let's round this up. Clemson won for 3 big reasons. The first one is Tua struggled. We learned a lot about Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship. He's not NFL ready. Clemson also simply outcoached Alabama. And the third reason is some of the play calling didn't go Alabama's way. There were multiple play calls. I think you could have said, oh, that's holding on a receiver. That's pass interference. I think a few questionable no calls were not the entire difference in the game. But it did have somewhat of an impact on a 4th down, on a big 3rd down. You could argue that both of those could have been pass interference, and they weren't called. But most of the reason why Clemson beat Alabama and really dominated Alabama was that Tua sucked, and Clemson simply outcoached and out-schemed Alabama in the national championship. Oh, I hate doing this. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I really don't like self-promotion. It makes me feel like a used car salesman. But I got to do it. So if you don't know, this is my podcast, Strong Opinion Sports. It's my favorite thing in the world. And you can subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud. You can find it on YouTube. You can find the full entire hour-long podcast on YouTube. You can also find shorter breakout clips like the one you just watched. Please do me a favor. If you like anything I had to say, maybe you hate me and you're mad about something, share this podcast with your friends. Share it on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you want to do. Help me grow by telling your friends about this show.